deserve at least a little round of applause. There's fear. Everyone wants to know what their marks are, but ladies, you did really good. That's a great first outing. And I think you should all be really proud of yourselves. Now, you haven't seen any marks yet. So of course, that's the first thing. And as I said, we'll see those next class. Second thing is, keep in mind that you're constantly building on these things. And we watch and listen to each other to get inspired. And remember, we don't go online and steal content. You don't steal other people's words, but you can be inspired by how other people have organized things and by the way they do things. That's fair game. It's much like the clothing industry. You can't steal a Dior dress thing, but you can be inspired by the design, and you can same it. As long as you don't put the Dior labels on it, it's yours. Is it going to be made the same and have the Dior? Maybe not. So speeches are the same thing. You want to watch, be inspired by the other people in the class, see things that maybe go, oh, I'm going to try that, or see things I got to remember not to do that, which is also a really good thing. So this is good. I'll have these marks posted for you for next class with all of the comments. I'll put comments down, and there's a rubric and stuff, but the comments are the important thing, and I'll post up also my sheet of comments that you can see that. But generally speaking, I think it's important at this point also, and any comments on the other side, ladies, I'm not looking at your comment chat stuff, so if there is comments on the other side from home, please make sure that you just turn on your mic and say anything as we're going. What I want to do is talk just a little bit about some of the things to think about and some of the observations I've had so far of places and things that we need to be thinking about as we move forward. And I've put up a sheet, so I literally have gone through our classes, and there's some key things. So if you go to, you don't have to do it now, but in the announcements, there's just a little check sheet of sorts in the announcements. You might have seen that in there. It's got a picture of a lady who's with glasses or whatever. So you don't have to go now, but it's there. That is a lovely little reminder just in general of some of the things I want to just remind you of right now that we want to keep in mind. And again, we're building on things, so it's constantly thinking about these things. And these things that I've mentioned are little. The big thing is you all got up here and did it. The first thing, did you notice from the entire, not one person said, I can't do it. Sorry, I can't do it. I can't get up and do a speech. Sorry, I can't do it. No one did that. Not a single person in this class said, oh no, I'm too nervous. I can't get up and speak. Everyone did it. That there is incredible. Everyone spoke for close to the time that we're looking at. A few people were a little bit over, a few a little bit less. But generally speaking, you all got up and did it. So the rest of it's all little stuff. It's the little things that we start playing with. And that's what I've made a little note of. And I'm going to go through some of those pieces now just to give you an idea. And then, of course, in Blackboard, when I post up your grade, you'll see there's comments. Go and look at the comments, because I'm going to spend time putting in the comments. They're only going to help you do better. And then also watch your speech. So go and take a look. It's there. If you can't get it, let me know, and I'll but your speeches are, go and look at your speech. So go to that link in Dropbox. If you download it, give it some time. It's a gigabyte. Or you watch it in Dropbox, then you don't have to download it. But it's a big file. Watch your speech. I think the most important thing you can do is watch what you did. And I say this because you practiced. I really feel that I did good. And we all say, I feel that I did good. And maybe you did do really good. And really did pretty darn good. But the way you interpret how you did your speech and the way we see your speech is different. It's always, you're in the moment, you're doing the thing. We're watching it, we're seeing all those bits come together. And so by watching the speech, even though it's from an angle, you can hear what you're doing and you get a sense of what you're doing. You can see it. And you might go, oh, look what I did. Oh, listen to that. And while we as the class might not have thought that that was something that is noteworthy, you might hear it and go, oh, that drives me nuts. I got to fix that. And so you want to be your strongest critic and your strongest supporter, watching and celebrating the great things you did, and also then looking and saying, okay, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to deal with those other things. So it's really important you watch it not to say, oh, I sound terrible. Ignore what you sound like and your own dislike of watching and listening to yourself, and use it as an exercise of improvement. And I say this because the second side is you have to think, well, James is going to know best. You're watching the same speech I'm watching. My difference is I've got this sheet that you've all seen, and I've just seen a lot of speeches, and I'm trying to get you to go down a very particular way of A, organizing, and B, thinking about the delivery that you personalize to you, falling within those areas. So all that to say, you've got a good opportunity to think about what you're doing as well. All right, so there's a number of different things. Where do we want to start? We've got a number of different things here that become important as we're thinking about these speeches. And I think the first thing that becomes really important as I'm thinking about what I saw is time. And I get a lot of questions from students about time. Well, how long your goal is 4 minutes. Not just the goal, that's where you're aiming. So a little bit under, a little bit over is not so bad, but you want to be in the 4 zone. 4:30 and is a little above, and 3:30 is a little below. Think of your speeches as 8 30-second packages. So you want to give me 8 of them. That's 4 minutes. That's what so if you give me 3 minutes, 30 seconds, you've now only given me 7 packages. If you give me 4 minutes, 30 seconds, you're giving me 9 packages. I only want 8. The idea is that you fit the content, and that's the goal, is you fit the content into a 4-minute window. And if we say, I couldn't get all the stuff in, well, then you had too much stuff. And it's not about having a lot of stuff, it's about how you present that stuff. So that's a big piece of what you're doing. So you're trying to fit in that window. And as you get above, you start to lose a little bit. And as you're really below, you start to lose a bit because your goal is to get in there. That ultimately comes down to just practicing that speech and knowing that, okay, as you've started practicing, you might add some stuff, you might take some stuff out. Because you know the speech, you might find a situation where you change something. It's just knowing where you're going and keeping and working with your timer so that you know, okay, I'm under time. I'm going to have to string this out a little bit. Maybe I'm talking too fast. Or if the time is getting close, you're just going to have to get rid of something before you get into that conclusion, which is why we always want you to know. I want you to know your conclusion so you can jump into it at any time. But time becomes important. I mean, that's your contract. That's what you're getting paid to do. If you're a paid speaker and I want a 30-minute talk or a 20-minute talk, please come to our organization. And you get up and talk for 6 minutes and they want 20 minutes, well, they're not going to be happy. Or if you go over, now you're eating into someone else's time, and that's not good either. So working towards the time is very important. Don't let the word count confuse you, because there's no word count. There is no word count. Now, I know you're going to say, but sir, you mentioned words. You're talking at about 3 words a second. And if you figure that out, 3 words a second for 4 minutes, approximately there's a bunch of words in there. But it's not, I'm not interested in the word count. I'm interested in the time. And depending on the pause, depending on how fast you're talking, will all influence the time. So you want to work towards that time. Now, here's something that also is very important, and we're really at the start of it, and there's some great examples of this, and there's some examples of not doing it, but remember, as you're looking and thinking about your speech visually, remember as you're doing that, you've got those 5 parts. You've got your introduction, conclusion, 3 parts, maybe some kind of story or example that's going to bring it to life. How you get to everything is the gold of your speech. Now, the big problem, and I'm still hearing some of it, it's early days though, is the way you're transitioning and moving to things sounds like a term paper. And the best example of the transition sounding like a term paper is when you get to the conclusion and go, in conclusion. Like, hold on a second, that's not a good transition. I mean, it works to see. It works, but it's not good. Because in the context of delivering the speeches as we're dealing with them, remember, the number one thing that you're trying to do is not speak at us. You're not lecturing your audience. You are lecturing your audience, but you don't want it to sound like a lecture. I know, that's a weird, it's like, what? You're talking at the audience. You're talking at them. But you don't want it to sound like you're talking at them. You want it to sound like you're talking with the audience, because that's going to make them more receptive to your content. Those transitions are a big piece of how you continue to make that flow. So think about it when you're talking to someone and you're talking to your sister or your cousin. Oh, I went out yesterday and I went to the Abaya Mall, and before I went to the Abaya Mall, I went right across to the Murdiff cafeteria and I went to the tea place, and the guy made me this fantastic tea. Oh, it was the fragrance of the saffron in the tea brought tears to my eyes. It was beautiful. So I had not only one cup, then I had another cup, and then I just stood around and watched him making it because he had such passion as he's pouring the tea from the. And as you get to the end of that conversation, you're never going to say to your cousin, in conclusion, a great place to have tea is at the Murdiff tea cafeteria. You're never going to say that. And like, there's no conversation that you're ever going to use with someone who you're talking with that you're going to have the refrain, in conclusion. That's a written thing. What you want to be taught, so you want to be thinking, how do I get to everything? How am I transitioning from one idea to the other? How do I typically do that in a conversation? So, you might be talking. So what's the better approach? So the transition, the better approach to that finish might be, and we've talked about this, and there's no one way. So it's a matter of playing with it and thinking, okay, how do I keep it? But it might be so let's go back to the first couple of things. So maybe you've got your first point. Maybe we're talking, what could we talk about today? So let's talk about why it's important to eat vegetables. Okay, so we talk about clean eating. Excellent. Non-processed food eating. So first of all, we're going to talk about non-processed food eating in this talk, and I'm going to talk to you about why this is a really important thing in the world. And then I'm going to talk to you about, so why is it an issue? How do we start getting the world to eat cleaner? And third, how do you start? So I might start off with that whole bit. I'm talking about what a clean environment is all about, and clean eating is all about. It reduces CO2 emissions and it's good for our health. And hey, according to the World Health Organization, 68% of the population suffers from type 2 diabetes. If you look at the UAE, right, and then so this is really important. And so as I get to the end of that first section, I might be sitting there and say, so we know this is important. And so you've got a little bit of a conclusion at the end of your first section. We know it's important. The transition might be, so the question on your mind is, what do we need to do? That's the transition that leads to the second point, which is, so what has to happen? And then as I get to the end of that section, I might say, so we know we've got a problem. So I'm reminding people, we know what we have to do. So now you're saying the obvious question that's on your mind is, we know this is the problem. We know this is what you had to. How do I start? Now, that's the transition into my third section, which is, how do you start doing it? So, I mean, I'm just making this up as I go, and I'm just thinking of it brutally how to do it so that I'm not saying point 1, point 2, point 3, but I'm framing it kind of as the questions that people will have. Okay, so we know what we got to do. Yeah, we know it's important. And how do I start? And that's my third little bit, is just how do we start doing it? What's the way to start making this happen? And so then I go into the third part of how you actually physically start eating cleaner. And if I was doing that persuasive speech, the first thing would be, it's like, don't start all at once. Start a little bit. Just start by not having the Omani chips tomorrow. One time a day. When you're going to go reach for the Snickers bar in the machine, the Skittles, the Omani chips, and that, just one time a day, that afternoon snack, go for an apple. Just once. Let's just see what happens. We start slow and we'll build into it till we start to gradually change it when we get rid of it. So that might be, but anyway, so then you've got to finish. So I got to conclude. The brute transition into a conclusion is, so in conclusion, or some form of that, which we would never say. Whereas a better way to do it, and the way I would probably do it, is that I would pause a little bit and I say, so what do we know? That'd be my transition. So what do we know? And then I would, in a word or two, give the three parts. We know that we need to be eating clean because it's better for the planet. We know that we can start eating clean simply by putting the right food in the fridge. And we know that if I start doing this once a day, just by not making a better choice and making this, if we do all three of these things, and then you lead into your summation, all three of these things, and I might repeat them again, boom, 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 just one word, boom, boom, boom. All three of these things are going to make this world better. They're going to make our world better. They're going to make us better. And who doesn't want that? So let's make the world better. And after I've said, so the point being, I've just made that up. I haven't really thought too hard about it. But the point being, and I would kind of write those down, those little transitions, thinking, okay, how am I going to fit it in? What's the big piece that you're trying to do? Keep it conversational. You're giving hard facts, you're giving things, it's not like you're dumbing down the content, but you're making it sound a little bit more approachable so that your audience can engage with it. You're making it feel like you're talking with them, not at them. When you're talking with your mom or dad and they're lecturing, and I'm going to tell you, and do this, and do this, and do this. What happens when people do that? And they're going on and on and on, and you're getting in trouble for something. And they're yelling, and what happens after about 4 seconds? You're standing there. What do you do? Exactly. You zone out. And then you pray that you zone back in before they get to the end, because then they stop and you go, were you listening to anything I said? Yeah. What did I say? He's like, you don't know. And then you're, right? No one likes to be lectured. And the same when you're giving a presentation. It's like, oh, it's just we get that whole thing going. So if you can talk with your audience, sounding a little bit more the way people talk, you're one step ahead. And then if you can start integrating that flow, that leading your audience through with better transitions, which a lot of people don't do, it just gets easier by the minute. And the best part about these transitions that I keep talking about, once you start getting comfortable, you can actually use the same transition approach almost with everything. And I know that the first thing that goes on in our brain is like, but everyone's going to know. Only this class will get comfortable with the way you do things. No one else hears you speak that much. And if someone only hears you doing presentations a couple times a year, they'll never clue in. So that makes it pretty easy. So thinking about time, thinking about transitions, thinking about how you're speaking. Yes. Your transitions were good. Yeah. Yeah. That was a good example of how to do it. A little bit, it's almost like each of your parts has a little introduction, a little conclusion, and then you drag into the next. That's really, but it needs to sound conversational, not term paper. And that's the problem, is that you've spent so many years writing term papers and then presenting term papers, and you present the term paper like it's been written, but you don't want to present a term paper here. You want to give that information in a more approachable, I'm talking with you fashion. And so that's the other thing, is keeping it very, the sound and the feel. It's a hard thing to feel, but the way you're saying things, and that feel is the vocal variety. A little bit loud, a little bit soft, a little bit happy, a little bit angry. You can be angry and then boom, transition into being not angry. That keeps your audience in tune, and it starts to be real. Think about when you're talking about something that you're really happy with and you talk really fast and it's amazing, and then, but there's a downside. And so then you've changed, and the downside is you're talking. So that's really important, that's like super important, that it's really as you talk, not that term paper feel. But you also need to be thinking about the speed that you talk. And this is a problem. This is hard, actually. So there's two things that really work well, with the transitions as well. One, pausing. You need to pause. You need to pause between points, just a little bit longer than you usually do, so that your audience who's listening gets the cue that you've moved on to something as you also transition. So one of the things you're going to notice when you listen to your speech, and if you listen to a few of it, you're going to hear it, and most, it's pretty generic so far. You're still talking too fast. And I know that some of you are going to say, yeah, but I talk fast. I say, I can talk very fast too. But when I'm presenting, you present a little slower. And you actively have to talk a little bit slower, so your audience can keep up, so they can process what you're saying, so you can process what you're saying, and put all the pieces in there, not just the words, the facial expressions, the gestures, the looking at your audience. So one, you need to pause between points. And it feels awkward, because pausing is also the place where you put the ums and the ahs in. So you need to pause. Two, you really are talking a little bit slower than you normally talk. That takes a lot of getting used to, but not too much. You're going to get used to it quick. If when you're talking, it kind of feels like you're talking a little bit slow at the start, you're going, oh, it feels really slow though. You're probably talking at the right pace. So if it feels slow as you're presenting, then you're in the right zone. And when we do our little things in the class, like next class, we'll start off with something. We do those little speaking things. That's where you try stuff. And if it goes miserable and then you get rid of it. But talking a little bit slower, that's the place to try it. Because in that moment when you're practicing and you're talking a little bit slower, if you're talking too slow, I'm going to say to you, hey, that's good. Now speed it up just a hair. And so those are those opportunities where you start playing, okay, I'm just going to try this a little bit. I'm going to try that a little bit. So it's talking a little bit slower, making sure you put in the pauses, and those pauses help connect with those transitions, creating better flow. Remember, this is so important. You're talking with people. You're not quizzing them. And remember, it's our total disadvantage that you're coming from all of your classes that you've got, where you're going to do presentations and you hear the professors, and we're so used to producing content that you're going to get graded on, you're going to get quizzed on, that you're trying to put together something so the professor, oh, she's really thinking. It's not about stumping the audience here. You're not trying to put the audience in a position where they have to figure anything out. You don't want them to figure anything out. Tell them what they need to know. Remind them why you're telling them this, and give them an idea why the first part that you're saying, how does it fit with the second part? And how does the second part fit with the third part? Don't rely on anyone figuring it out, because they might have zoned out. So you got to tell them, but you got to do it in a nice way. So a little checklist here, right? And you start to develop that little stuff. But that becomes really important. Everyone was really good actually with this other one. You didn't move too much, which was nice. You really don't want to move too much. Remember, everything you do is purposeful. From looking around the class and trying to make some eye contact, but really, the goal is not really eye contact. The goal is for the class to have the feeling as you're talking with them that you're including them in the conversation. And so if I'm talking and I'm only looking at you, or if I'm only looking over here, am I looking at one person? We do this, right? You get nervous, and what do? You just look at one person because that person becomes your safety blanket. You've got to practice including the class without getting nervous looking at people, because you're going to get someone who yawns. You're going to get people who are sitting in ways that you interpret as being indifference to what you're saying. So all those things. So in a sense, you also want to be a good audience. But when people sit with their arms crossed like this, and if they're at an angle, right? Or if they're holding up their head like they can't, right? All of those things, yeah, holding the head, it's okay. But all of those things send messages as you interpret. What's that mean? Is she bored? If you're sitting right in the front of the class and you let out the biggest yawn, and fortunately we have masks on, but you still see it when someone goes, right? What's that going to happen if at that moment I'm looking at you, you let out the big yawn? At that moment, I'm going, what the heck? Am I boring? Right? And it might just be you're tired. So you want to, but you need to actively do the class scan, not too fast, to include everyone, but beware that typically when I do it, I'm not looking at anyone. I'm just looking. And it's ignoring the people, but stopping every now and then so that there's the feeling that you're connecting, but really you're not. In some cases, I just say, I'm just looking through people. I'm really looking at the wall. You just happen to be in the way. So I'm looking at the chair. You just happen to be in front of it. I'm not really looking at you. I'm just looking at the picnic table outside the window. But the view is that way. And that's really important. Again, helps to create the impression that you're communicating with the people. And if you sound the way you talk, who was it? Who was it? Matha was a good example. Matha, when you were talking, and this is I just use Matha because it just happened. But Matha's was a great example because Matha was talking, and it was a good speech. It was a nice speech. A little stiff. And then when Matha, when you finished, you started talking. You were just talking to us. You were talking to me a little bit for a second. And the flow, so you'll have to listen to it on the tape. But the way you were talking after you did the speech is the way I want you to talk when you do the speech. And the difference was your voice was a little more animated. There was a little bit more emotion in it, whereas the speech that you did, which was very good, don't get me wrong, had a little bit more of the feel of I'm talking at you as opposed to talking with you. And so that was a really good example of that. So we just want to play with that a little bit. Eye contact we got, doing those things we got. Conclusions are a must. And again, transitions getting into them. Remind us what we've spoken about. You want to remind your audience, but you want to transition into it not as in conclusion, in summary, the end of, think about how you're getting there so that it's fun. It's the way you would talk, the way you would say something as you get to that end. As I said, my speech is always the same way. So what do we know? What's the take home? What have we learned? I love what's the take home. What's the take home from this? That depends on the audience you're talking to. But the take home is, okay, what do I get from this speech? What's the take home? What's the present? What's in the little goodie bag? What's the take home from this? What have we learned? And I just find for me, those are the ones I constantly use over and over and over again. And I'm used to it. So I know that I know, okay, I got your three things, you got your two, boom, boom, boom. I don't have to say what those final points are in a big sentence, just a couple words, because everyone knows what they are. In fact, one of the presentations I'm going to show you is an excellent example of not only how to use sources in a speech, but his conclusion is brilliant. And it's like he fires it so fast. But he sums up the entire speech, referencing things from the speech in the conclusion in like 2 words for these things. 2 word here, 2 word. and you kind of know exactly what he spoke about. And you as he's concluding, you're referencing back to what he said, and you're going, I totally get it. Yeah, I get it. That's what you're playing with. Is that conclusion is not offering anything new. It's, hey, this is what we've got. This is why it's important. This is what we got. This is what we do with it. This is what we know. This is why you know it. So you've got that little bringing together the ideas and then summing it all up. Well, that's fairly hard. You most of you did pretty good at it. You're along the way, and so I'm very impressed. That's something to constantly work at, though, and the conclusion ultimately becomes probably the most important part of your speech, because that's the last thing we remember. We don't remember the start. We don't remember the middle, but we remember the end. So that becomes really important. Gestures, some of you use them, some of you didn't. If you do use them, and the next speech, you'll be encouraged to use gestures. No visuals in the next speech. Still, we'll add those in the last two. And the reason for that is I want you to concentrate on speaking. As soon as you add stuff, that's another thing to concentrate on. So let's just concentrate on doing this and then add things. And as I said, you don't really need visuals for anything. You're the speech. If all fails, you've got to be able to do your speech. And I mean, I've had situations where I've literally had a PowerPoint or something, and I've held up my computer. Is it a good way to do it? Nope. But in a room like this, if I've got to do it that way, I'll do it that way. But because what do you got to do? If you're using gestures in any way, shape, or form, big, so holding them out, holding your hands out, slow. You don't do anything fast, because it too much eye tracking then. You don't want to disturb people from listening and getting what you're saying. Keep your gestures slow, large, big, so that someone can see them, so they're exaggerated, and hold them. You don't have to get rid of them right away. It's a slow thing. So if you're talking, so how did you do the numbers? You did it like this? It's very awkward. But you did 3 things. It's a lot of people do it that way. And it could work. It's kind of weird. It feels weird how long you can hold your hand like that. And it doesn't lend itself, depending on how you, I strongly recommend just doing like this, and just practice. You want to practice it. So however you do it, you could do it like this. Practice it to see how long can you hold it for. Can you hold it for the count of 5? Yeah, I think you did it like this. Because you're not the only person. Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, like that. Yeah. I mean, it's really uncomfortable for me, but it might be comfortable. But can you do then? If you only want to do 2 of the fingers, is it easy to do? Which ones do you do? Then that looks weird, right? Yeah. So think about how you do that stuff. Think about how you could hold it. So if I'm doing 1, I could do 2, and then I could do 3. And you don't bounce, you don't hold it. Don't do them close to you, because sometimes people do this. Don't do that. Do 1, 2, 3. Nice and big, easy, visible. That's something, again, you want to practice. And you can leave your hands up. If I've done 1, 2, 3, I can just leave them up and keep talking. It's PowerPoint. And then slowly get rid of my hands. Whether you hold your hands like this. Who had the white sheet? You had the white sheet. You got the white sheets. Too many, but it was okay, but too many. You needed to have a sheet, right? There's a few of you who had your papers over there. You needed the paper here. It's not going to kill you, but you want to have this just in a couple of points. So if you've got a piece of paper, a few of you did that, and I get it. Don't do it. Have it just a nice little outline. It's easier. If you do have that piece of paper, put it here in case you got to come and see it. Because and never use your computer. So there was a couple of you put your computers out, because you'll just read the computer. Don't do it. Don't do it. You'll read. It's only 4 minutes. You don't need it. Don't do it. And all that says to me, and I don't know, you're nervous, right? I get it. A little more practice. Just a little. Yeah.
I use my computer to time myself. Is that okay?
Yeah. I would use your phone just to get used to to that process. You could use your computer. Like that's, I mean, in your case, you were there, so we didn't see it. If you're here, bringing your computer up to time yourself is a little bit awkward because it's big. I would just use your phone, and then you're just used to it as well. So, but the timing is fine when you want to time it, but just think the optics and what's there. I mean, if you're going to use your computer, so if you're in class using your computer to time yourself, put it on the ground. Then it's a monitor, right? And then you just see it. It's just sitting there. So as you're talking, you see it. So instead of having it at desk level, put it down, and then no one sees it. Fine. Don't put your notes on it. Again, if you need to use notes, the optimum thing, 1 page. That's the optimum. Have it in 1 page. Now, again, it wasn't bad what you did. You weren't outright reading them. That works. Try and get it down to so that you have 1 page, and ultimately that you have none, that you don't need it. But if you do need it, you've got it. So and all that usually says to me it's a little bit more practice so that you can just get through it. But you can have that outline, and yes, of course, timing is very important.